Christian, thanks for joining us. Appreciate you being with us.
Thanks, Sean.
All right, so the first thing I want you to explain is I didn't even realize that there's this Presidential Advisory Commission on election integrity. What is that board? What do you guys do? What's the goal and strategy of it?
Well, listen, that was formed in 2017, and every left-wing group there was sued us, and there was a melee of litigation that resulted in it being disbanded in like late 17.
Really? And so who appointed? Did President Trump appoint you to it?
Yeah, President Trump appointed me, Chris Kobach, Hans von Spakovsky, Christy McCormick, who's on the AC now. So yeah, we tried to do something by gathering all the voter rolls around the country, and every single Secretary of State went berserk and didn't allow us to get all this data to do an analysis about how clean the elections were.
Interesting. So where does it stand right now? Where does this commission stand?
It stands like sort of like the Providence Steamroller. I mean, it's a done dead thing. They won the NFL championship in 28. They're gone. It's gone. We haven't had a passee in existence for almost 8 years.
So is the goal right now, President Trump is on fire, would you recommend that he reconstitute this panel with a different mission, the same mission? What?
No, I'll tell you what they're doing, and that's a good thing. The Justice Department has power under a federal statute to get the same information that we sought as part of the Election Integrity Commission. Those letters have already gone out, Sean, to Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, other states, to get these voter rolls and start doing analysis. This was part of the 1960 Civil Rights Act, because states like Mississippi wouldn't ever tell the feds who was and wasn't registered. So this got in this federal law in 1960 that states have to give this to the Attorney General. That's why the Attorney General has asked for it, and that's why Secretaries of State are wailing and gnashing teeth, like Sheena Bellows in Maine, who's complaining about it, and as well as other secretaries of state.
But here's what I don't get, and this is why I thought that voter information was public, meaning that I know when I was at the RNC, Data Trust now, which is a private entity or a public, I don't even know what the legal criteria is. But my point is, I thought that most states, most of that was public data.
It depends. I mean, we've been litigating in courts all over the country. We're in the First Circuit. We just had a big victory there. Fourth Circuit, we're arguing, I think, in 2 months. South Carolina makes the data public, but only to South Carolina registered voters. That's the issue that we have in the Fourth Circuit in Richmond coming up in 2 months. They're using these laws, these local laws, these anti-federal laws to block public data from being public. And that's exactly why PILF sued South Carolina. And that's exactly why we won. And that's why they appealed to the Fourth Circuit. We've beaten places like New Mexico and Maine and Colorado. These places are denying public data, Sean. So it's not so easy just to assume that RNC can get the data, because they might be able to get the data through vendors, but the general public can't.
Or maybe through a state party, right?
Right.
Okay, but here's what I don't understand. South Carolina, to me, has had a Republican governor, a Republican legislature. Like, why that? I don't get that. That one blows my mind when you say it.
Yeah, how about that? One of the most conservative states. I don't think Henry McMaster fully understands what's happening. I don't think I know the Attorney General is on the side of transparency, Alan Wilson.
Alan Wilson, yeah.
He's been very helpful in this case. But I don't think that the governor of South Carolina fully is aware that the Election Commission in South Carolina is fighting against election integrity, against transparency. And we already won in the lower court in Columbia. Now we have to go to Richmond to defend our victory just to allow the voter rolls to be examined.
You mean Richmond, South Carolina?
Negative. Richmond Fourth Circuit Court of Appeal.
Oh, okay. I get it. I didn't realize that's where, see, this is why you're a lawyer and I'm not. I didn't realize that's where the Fourth Circuit was. So here's what I don't get, though. The Attorney General, Alan Wilson, you say he gets it. The Henry McMaster, the governor, maybe not. Okay. What's up with the Secretary of State? The Secretary of State's a Republican, right?
Yeah, I used to be general counsel of the South Carolina Secretary of State, and they don't have anything to do with elections.
What?
This is one of these states like North Carolina and Wisconsin that delegates to a board.
No kidding. So it's the board, and who appoints this board?
the legislature and the governor, I think, or a mix thereof. So these are all people accountable to the very Republican political branches, yet they're hiding transparency. They're blocking access to the voter rolls from people who actually know what to look for. Yeah, they'll give it to their local people, but they don't know what to look for.
All right, I hate to interrupt this conversation, but tonight, if you are looking for a great night's sleep, I'm going to help you big time. I switched over to Boll & Branch sheets, and my goodness, they have made a huge difference. They are so comfortable to get into every night. I love them so much. I literally ordered a second pair the other night and paid for them myself. That's how great these things are. And you can join me as well. The thread count, the quality is unbelievable. There's a 30-day guarantee, so you literally have nothing to lose. If you want a better night's sleep, it starts with your bedding. Go to bollandbranch.com/Spicer to save 15%. That's BOLLAND branch.com/Spicer for 15% off and free shipping. bollandbranch.com/Spicer for a great night's sleep. All right, back to the conversation. It's not time to go to sleep just yet. Okay, I'm not going to there's two things here. Let's go the first one first. If I'm you, why not just get a local Republican to hand it over? Like, in other words, it can't be that hard to find somebody with your connections. Is the issue that you're fighting on behalf of everyone else, or that you can't get access to it?
Yeah, look, our local counsel was the former chairman of the Lexington County Republican Party. And if you know anything about South Carolina politics, that's as big as a Republican county as you get. But that isn't the point. The point is transparency. Federal law says under the National Voter Registration Act that these voter rolls are transparent. They have to be disclosed. And so it's not a solution just to get a straw man to go get them. We have to fight for the principle of election integrity. And it's outrageous in South Carolina that particular officials are not on the right side of this.
When we started this conversation, Christian, I thought to myself, okay, this is probably all Dem states. We obviously are now talking about one of the most conservative states, South Carolina. Are they alone, or are there other Republican conservative type states that are in there? Please don't say yes. Please don't say yes.
We had to sue Utah earlier this summer. Utah exempts, you can opt out of transparency if you're a voter. When you register to vote, you can say, no, don't make my records transparent under federal law. And so 40% of the Utah voter rolls are hidden from the public.
Okay, this begs an obvious. So, all right, let me just ask the second part and then get back to this for a second. Is it trend mostly Democrat states, or is this actually a big bipartisan problem?
Well, look, Alabama charges like $30,000 or more to get the voter roll. They fought like crazy against the NAACP to disclose it. And they won a big case where they said, we only have to disclose in Alabama in paper. So we asked for it in paper, Sean, and they said, we really can't do it. It'll be like $3 million for you to get the voter roll. So there's another example: Utah, South Carolina, Alabama. But we've also got Hawaii, Maine, these other states like Michigan that are problematic. So it's not just a red or blue issue. It's both sides of the problem.
All right, because that gets to my bigger thing. I've always believed that there's always a reason why. Like, in other words, it's not that hard in this day and age to send a file. Like, here's the file. You can download it. You can, even if you charge for it, like even when you request a Freedom of Information Act, sometimes they'll say the copies to copy all this information is X amount of dollars, like it's 5 cents a page or something. Which I get. I don't have a problem with that if it's reasonable. If it's like, hey, this costs us money. Then I think a reasonable cost in those cases is warranted. But it seems to me as though if you see this kind of pattern going on, generally it means to me that someone's hiding something, that they don't want to comply with a rather easy request. At least for me, maybe I'm just sort of conspiracy oriented, but like, is there some overarching excuse that they give you guys?
Yeah, well, they don't give it to us, but doing this for a decade, I can tell you what it is. There are always big problems on voter rolls: missing dates of birth, people's names who are screwed up. People registered, Sean, multiple times. We found a guy in Pittsburgh named Rashawn Slade. He was registered 6 times simultaneously. Everywhere we look, there's a mess. Everywhere we look, there's missing information. So one of the reasons they want to hide the voter rolls is because they don't want their work checked. They don't want anybody to find their problems.
Well, it's funny you say that, because when I was in the White House, they did this story that says, because I think in light of the commission that you were part of, the story came out and it said Sean Spicer is still registered to vote in Rhode Island, which is where I grew up. And my understanding is that when you go to a new state, it says where you previously registered. And so in this case, I'm registered to vote in Virginia, where I have been since the late 1990s. And I thought I did what I was supposed to do, which is I check the box. I tell them where I was previously registered, and then they undo it, right? That makes sense. I might have actually first been registered in Connecticut, where I worked and went to school, and then went to Virginia. Anyway, but the point is that I assume that when you do this, the law says, okay, the current Secretary of State notifies the previous one and says, hey, Mr. Smith, in this case, Mr. Spicer, has moved. And somehow they made it upon me, like it was somehow like I had done something wrong, when all I had done was move and register somewhere else. And they tried to make this some kind of example. I actually think it exposed exactly the problem that you're talking about.
Sean, it might have been the only time the left-wing media cared about somebody registered in two states, because we have sent thousands of other examples to reporters, to election officials. This is commonplace. And by the way, Virginia is one of the only states that say, where were you used to be registered? Where did you previously live? Most states don't do it. We just issued a report showing people registered in New York, Pennsylvania, Florida, in double states by the thousands. So what you did is nothing unusual. It's because states aren't doing their job to find out where people used to live. They aren't doing their job.
But so in my case, let's just say it wasn't Virginia. Let's say I moved to Maryland. Who is responsible for telling the previous state, hey, this person is no longer registered in your state, they're now ours?
Nobody. Federal law doesn't address this. The closest you get is under the NVRA, motor voter. After a period of time goes by, if a state is doing their job, and most states aren't, if a state is doing their job, they will figure out that you moved away. But it takes like 3 federal cycles before you could even do anything. At the fastest, at the quickest, it takes like 6 years.
Okay, so let's do the math right now. So it's 2025. This story came out in 2017, so 8 years ago in the White House, right? And I'm just trying to do this math. I in full disclosure, I didn't take math in college. So if I was, I was 45 when I was in the White House. Okay. So I hadn't voted in Rhode Island since at least when I was 20 years old, maybe. It could have been 18. So let's just say at best, it had been 25 years. Don't you think that's kind of insane that I could have been on the voter rolls for 25 years, never voted, never worked, never cast, didn't have a license from there, didn't pay taxes there? And yet I was still on the voter rolls 25 minimum, by the way. It probably could have been closer to 27 years.
Totally insane. I have made the offer before that we are happy. The Public Interest Legal Foundation is happy to represent you and anyone like you for free to threaten Rhode Island and say, hey, you need to get him off the rolls or we're going to sue you because you can't do this under the NVRA. We're looking for those kind of cases, more of them. But you're exactly right. It's insane. And Sean, here's the worst part. Blue states are the worst at this. People like Jocelyn Benson, people like Sheena Bellows.
Right, who are those people?
People like Jenna Griswold in Colorado. They don't care.
So those are the secretaries of state?
Correct.
Why don't they care?
Because they're militant progressive activists. Don't forget, Griswold tried to keep Trump off the ballot in Colorado. Jocelyn Benson.
Hold on. I don't mean to interrupt you, but you got to stop and just laugh at that. She wanted to keep Trump off the ballot, but she won't kick anyone off the ballot who's been nominating there for. I mean, there's such irony. She doesn't want one person to be listed on the ballot, but she doesn't mind everyone else kind of being on the rolls.
Yeah, Jocelyn Benson in Michigan, the Secretary of State there, who, by the way, take note of her because she aspires for higher office. She is terrible at this stuff. She lets dead people on the rolls for, we know their names. We visited their graves in Michigan. There's a video. If you Google PILF, Michigan graves, you can see for yourself. We visited their graves, 25,000 dead people, some dead for decades on the active rolls. She just doesn't care.
I'm trying to think of which one I want to ask next. If you're dead and you can prove it, Your organization can prove it. Why would Jocelyn want someone to stay on the rolls if they're dead?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this takes you straight into progressive ideology.
Okay, take
There's
me there.
an orthodoxy
Take me there.
on the left. Right. There's an orthodoxy on the left that it's better to not remove 30,000 dead people who are dead than to remove one living person by mistake, which, by the way, Oregon does. We had to sue Oregon. They actually are removing living people in Oregon as dead. They got it flipped over. But the progressives believe you can't take a risk. You don't dare remove anybody because you might remove somebody and disenfranchise them. And so that's where this is all coming from.
Okay. I wanted to save this question because this is the one that matters. A ton of people can be dead and still on the rolls. I was, as I said, on the rolls in Rhode Island for at least 25 years, but I never voted. And so the big $1 million question to you, Christian Adams, is have you guys found instances where dead people or people have voted in two states at once, i.e. meaning that they are actually benefiting from this in some way?
Of course we have, over and over and over and over again. Judith Presto in Pittsburgh. I visited her grave. She not only voted after she was dead, she registered after she was dead.
What?
Yeah, she registered. Her husband was arrested. We're finding this stuff all the time. Of course, the New York Times doesn't report on it. NPR doesn't report on it. But Google Judith Presto Public Interest Legal Foundation. You could see a picture of her tombstone that I actually took. She was dead in 13 and her husband registered her in 20.
Oh my God. So here's the funny thing, Christian. You mentioned you name checked NPR and the New York Times. If you listen to them, there's no fraud, right? They'll say there's no fraud. That's a right-wing talking point, a conspiracy theory. But you're telling me that you have literally posed next to the grave of a dead person that voted.
Yeah, Judith Presto in Pennsylvania. She's in a military cemetery outside of Pittsburgh. Like I said, go get the picture. PILF, Judith Presto, her husband was the one who did it. She died in 13. She registered in 20. She voted by mail in 2020.
That's amazing.
This is not a mystery. Over and over and over again, Sean, we find examples like this.
It's proof that there's life after death. I now, it maybe at least it can help religious folks prove that there's life after death because you can still vote. But when you expose this, Christian, and you say, okay, Judith Presto voted, she's dead, here's her death certificate, here's her grave, what does someone say to that? Like, this is where I don't get the argument, because this is where I was hoping you weren't going to go, but I thought this is what had to be the case. When that happens, what do government officials say?
Well, at least in the case of Presto, her husband was arrested after we discovered it, or charged at least. So in that instance, kudos to the Pennsylvania authorities. But Sean, I testified to Congress earlier this year with Judith Presto's grave in my written materials, right, in front of House admin. And what do I get for that? I got attacked by a lunatic representative from California. I mean, they just don't want to hear it. It goes into a black hole. It violates their orthodoxy, their dogma. You cannot say there's any voter fraud around the progressive left because they shut down, they ignore you, they insult you. But that's part of a well-developed tactic going back to the Bush years, where they annihilate people personally and smear them, very Linsky style, whenever you bring this stuff up. They have to shut you down. So it's part of a larger tactic on the left to hide voter fraud.
It's insane. When this member of Congress attacked you, just humor me. What was the line of attack? How dare you? How dare you insult a dead person's ability to vote? You're disenfranchising them?
It's a broader smear, Sean. It's what they do is they look for any mistake anybody has ever made, and they use that mistake to smear generally. And years ago, we found what we thought were non-citizens voting in Virginia, because that's what Virginia said. These are non-citizens. And they took them off the voter rolls. So we just said, hey, these are non-citizens and we're taking off the voter rolls. The left picks up on anything to denounce, to taint, to smear, because that's that's their whole method going back, to 1917. They're very in favor of smearing people, like you were. And so They delegitimize anybody like Hans von Spakovsky at the Heritage Foundation. Anybody who writes about voter fraud is delegitimized by the progressive left, by Media Matters, by The Nation, by Ari Berman, another mouthpiece on this issue. They denounce and delegitimize anybody who does good research.
Unbelievable. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.